It's been a while, hasn't it? Welcome back to Focus Attack Tech Corner. While we've been quiet for some time, it's not been due to a lack of activity on our part. Today I'm happy to present our latest major release, the Razer Panthera all-button and noir conversion panel kits. These kits are something that have been pretty heavily requested of us for quite some time, and with the release of this video, I'm happy to announce that they're finally available. This double feature video will be our most involved one yet, as this is a major conversion and all aspects of it need to be thoroughly addressed. We're also now accepting artwork submissions for this conversion kit, so you can purchase with confidence and be ready to play in style when you receive your order. Before we go any further, I'd like to extend my thanks to AllFightsticks for their huge hand in this project. It wouldn't have been possible without them, so please also check them out. This conversion kit is designed specifically for any variant of the first generation Razer Panthera. Each bundle comes with the conversion plate, artwork, and proper plexi. The Panthera Evo will not work here due to being a completely different design. On this side of the video, we'll be showing you the all-button conversion from start to finish. Clear space and let's get started. Let's talk about the tools you're going to need, and the tools that you might want to have to help this process along. I recommend keeping around a screwdriver with good leverage and a reversible bit, or both a Phillips screwdriver and a flathead screwdriver. You will have a few screws that will need to be dealt with using this. I also recommend having smaller tech drivers intended for smaller electronics parts. The 30mm snap-out tool from Buttercade isn't required, but it's extremely useful here, especially if you intend to reuse your original buttons. What is absolutely required here is some sort of controlled heating method. In my case, I am using my temperature-controlled heat gun. You could use a blow dryer set on high heat here, but in all honesty, a heat gun is king. In addition to this, I strongly recommend a Dremel with a cutting tool attached or a file. This job can certainly be completed without it, but it definitely helps. The more prepared you are tool-wise, the less of a hassle this will be. I also recommend the Buttercade Fast 110 release tool in the event that your quick disconnects are stubborn or crimped tightly. It's not required, but again, it always helps. Last but not least, I always keep my wire stripping and crimping tool nearby, just in case of emergency. It's nice to have in the event that something goes wrong. Well, shall we get started? This conversion begins in the simplest of ways, pressing the hatch button to open the arcade stick. Start by removing unnecessary items from the Panthera's inner compartment. This would include the Panthera's USB cable, any spare ball top or bat top handles you might have, spare buttons, and if you're feeling keen, you can remove the storage containers by simply unscrewing the Phillips screws holding them down. When that's done, let's take a look at the joystick. Begin by unplugging the 5-pin harness plug from your joystick. Mine might look a little different from yours, but the principle is still the same. The connector shouldn't require much fuss, just slide it off the joystick's connections. We won't be seeing it for a while. Next, we will need to remove the joystick mounting screw that secures the 5-pin harness additional ground cable. This is a Phillips head screw and where your good screwdriver will come into play. Make sure your screwdriver fits well to avoid stripping the head of the screw. Once you're ready, turn the screw counterclockwise to loosen it until it's completely removed. Once that's done, set the screw aside in a safe place. You can then tuck the 5-pin harness out of the way so it doesn't obstruct your workspace. We can come back to it later. The next step is to disconnect all the cables running to the buttons. Depending on your Panthera's condition and age, this may be very easy or slightly annoying, rarely in between. If your quick disconnects on your cables are stubborn, the Buttercade Fast 110 quick release tool is very handy here. Mine is an older model, but the newest one is available on our store. In the case of my Panthera, I won't need it as the cables have been disconnected many times, but this may not be the case for you. When you're ready to proceed, start unplugging all of the buttons. I typically recommend that folks take photos of their wiring before disconnecting anything, but the Panthera has a nice reference panel on the inside to tell you what goes where. So long as that diagram's intact, you shouldn't have to worry about getting it right on reinstall. Next, we will need to remove all of the push buttons. This is where the Buttercade 30mm snap-out tool really shines. For those of you that are tired of sore fingers or fighting stubborn panels, I can't recommend this tool enough. It makes uninstalling buttons from virtually any panel a breeze. Regardless of whether you have the tool or not, remove all 8 30mm push buttons from the Panthera's control panel. When you're finished, set them aside somewhere safe. Moving forward, we'll return to the joystick. There are still 3 Phillips head screws keeping the joystick attached to the body, but we'll first want to remove the ball top handle from the joystick shaft. This can be done by inserting the flathead side of your screwdriver into the slot at the bottom of the joystick shaft. This will keep the shaft in place so that it won't turn while loosening the ball top handle. Keeping the screwdriver in the slot, twist the ball top handle counterclockwise to break its torque. You can add a little counter force from the screwdriver side for a stubborn ball top or bat top handle. Once the torque has been broken, loosen the handle the rest of the way until it can be removed and set aside. Remove the shaft cover and dust washer by simply pulling away from the joystick and set those aside as well. Now the joystick can safely be removed. You will want to turn the remaining 3 Phillips head screws by turning them counterclockwise. Fully loosen and remove all 3 screws and then set them aside in a safe place. Put aside the joystick as well and the additional lower dust washer if it's present. Congratulations on making it this far, but this is now where the real meat of the project begins. The Razer Panthera is somewhat notorious for being easy to work on, but a bit of a nightmare when it comes to installing custom artwork. The original artwork is printed on the Panthera's plexi, and it is fixed to the upper panel using a strong bonding adhesive. In most cases, it cannot simply be pried off. The glue is very strong. To proceed forward, we must remove the original Panthera art. This is where the heat gun comes into play. It should be said that heat guns are not toys. You should exercise extreme caution while using one, as you could potentially hurt yourself or things around you if you're not careful. It's recommended to do this in an area away from highly flammable materials, so if you need to relocate your project, now would be the time to do so. The goal here is to gradually heat up the entirety of the Panthera's plexiglass panel cover so that the adhesive becomes more workable, allowing the plexi to separate from the rest of the panel. You will want to take extreme care to avoid both staying in one place for too long and also not accidentally direct heat towards the functions array of the panel. Heat guns are fully capable of melting whatever is in their path, so don't linger in one place for too long, and also don't use the heat gun right against the panel. In this case, I will set my heat gun to 950 degrees Fahrenheit on the high setting. Do your best to follow the pattern demonstrated here, taking breaks as necessary. This will take a good bit of time to get sorted out, so don't rush it along. If you can't already tell, this part of the video is very much sped up and not indicative of how long it could take on average. Work the panel over until it is pliable enough to slip a small, rigid but flat object in between the plexi and the panel. In my case, I'm using a small flathead tech driver here, and then I'm graduating onto a bigger screwdriver. The goal here is to get the adhesive at least started on letting go. The more you work it over, the bigger the object you will be able to slip in between both sides. It might seem unconventional, but my drywall spreader came to my rescue here. However, as you can see, the plexi still isn't quite ready to let go. If you're in the same spot I am in this case, the answer is, you guessed it, more heat. Again, be careful with the heat gun, but don't be shy about getting your point across. Continue to stay away from the functions panel while doing so. Once you've applied more heat, go back to prying with your favorite flat object of choice. The Panthera's plexi cover needs a lot of convincing to be completely removed. If you need to, apply heat again. Just keep doing this in a pattern. Heat, pry, heat, pry, heat, pry. It's a little stubborn, isn't it? Believe in yourself and eventually you will be successful in removing the old art. Once it's finally off, you can set it aside. In a lot of cases, it might be broken and unusable, so keep it as a trophy or discard it into the trash, your choice. With our dirty work completed and the actual panel revealed to the world, we can proceed once more. If you choose, you can use Goo Gone to get any residue off the original panel. In my case, it won't be used again, so I'm going to set it aside. Open the Panthera once again. There are 6 small Phillips head screws that keep the functions panel attached to the Panthera's upper lid. The screws will need to be removed so that the functions panel can be pulled from the upper lid. Your Phillips tech driver will come in handy here. These can be removed the same as the previous screws. Turn counterclockwise until they're fully loosened and then pull them out. Take care to catch them as they come out, as they can fall between the upper lid and the lower enclosure. Once the screws have been removed, pull out the panel and let it rest in the enclosure. Next, we are going to take a look at the upper lid's left hinge on the inside of the enclosure. Specifically, we're looking at the 3 Phillips head screws that keep the upper part of the hinge fastened to the lid. All 3 of these screws need to be removed. This is a required step that is necessary due to the spacer bracket obstructing a single screw that keeps the original panel in place. Remove all 3 upper hinge screws, but keep them close by. You will need them again shortly. You may notice the lid drooping slightly due to a lack of support from the left hinge once the screws are removed. This is normal. Do your best to support it in the meantime. Behind the hinge on the Panthera's lid, the plastic spacer bracket has now been made available for access. It is also held in by 3 Phillips head screws. As this is a bit of a tighter fit, I recommend using your Phillips head tech driver here. Remove all 3 Phillips head screws securing the plastic spacer bracket, set them aside, and then pull out the plastic spacer. Once the spacer has been pulled, you now have access to the single hidden screw. As mentioned before, the original panel cannot be removed without having dealt with the screw. Remove the single Phillips head screw and set it aside. You won't need it any longer. Once the screw is removed, you can reinstall the plastic spacer using its 3 Phillips head screws. Installation is the opposite of removal, so clockwise to tighten the screws. Line up the lid with the left side hinge, then retrieve the left side hinge screws you removed earlier and reinstall them as well. Good and tight works best here. Be careful to avoid stripping the screw heads by way of over-tightening. Bear in mind that this is a major structural support of the arcade stick, so don't leave anything loose. Put the functions array safely in the lower enclosure, then close the stick once more. We can now finally remove the original panel. There are 8 screws here in total that need to be completely removed before the panel can be lifted up off of the Panthera and set aside. The 2 screws at the bottom center are responsible for keeping the Panthera's button latch in place, so I prefer to remove them last. These 2 screws, along with the screw just below the top left corner, are the only screws we are keeping moving forward. Once all screws have been removed, lift the panel off the Panthera's lid and set it aside. Now we need to prep for surgery, as part of the Panthera's lid can cause obstructions during button installation on the new panel. While this isn't required in all cases, if you intend to do this, I recommend reinstalling the 2 screws that keep the Panthera's latch in place. This will keep the lid from walking on you while you're filing or cutting. Make sure the latch is aligned with the screw holes and then reinstall the latch screws. Let's take a look at the trouble area in question. The spot shown can potentially cause difficult installation or removal of buttons on the conversion panels. You don't need a great deal of material shaved off, even filing can get the job done here. In my case, I made a notch with my screwdriver to use as a reference for my cutting tool. You can use a Sharpie or whatever you might prefer. Whatever the method, do be careful when working with sharp tools. I'm going to use my Dremel to shave off the necessary space I need here. When you're finished cutting, remove the latch screws once more and reopen the Panthera. It's time to reinstall the function panel. Mount it back in place on the lid and reinstall the 6 Phillips head screws that keep it fixed in place. Like always, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Take care to not drop any of the screws in between the lid and the lower enclosure. It's now almost time to install the new panel. Before you get too excited, be sure to align the latch so that it's sitting properly in place with the holes for it on the lid. This may take 1 or 2 tries to get right, but once you do, carefully close the lid and hold it in place. Grab the new panel and then lay it on top of the lid, lining it up proper. With the new panel in place, first install the 2 latch screws. Once this is done, you can reinstall the 3rd screw in the hole just under the top left screw hole. With all 3 screws installed, You can now lay your art print on top of the conversion panel. Line it up to the best of your ability. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough. With the art print in place, retrieve and install your new plexi cover. At this point, line it up proper and retrieve your plexi screws. Here we're using the M4 by 12mm TE plexiglass screws as fasteners, with a 2.5mm hex key to tighten. Seat each screw individually by hand and hand tighten, then tighten them all the rest of the way in a crisscross pattern to achieve uniformity. There are 5 screws in total. At this point, it's safe to say the worst is over. Give yourself a pat on the back. Maybe take a break if you need it. When you're ready, open the Panthera once again. You'll now need to turn your attention to the Panthera's PCB shroud. This will need to be removed. It's held to the lower enclosure with 4 small Phillips head screws. You can use your Phillips head tech driver to remove them. I recommend removing the front 2 screws completely, but leaving the rear 2 screws loose and sitting in their screw holes for the ease of reinstallation. Once all of the screws have been loosened and removed, pull up to remove the PCB shroud and set it aside. You will now need your SOCD power cable. The large end of the power cable will need to be connected to the PCB's test pins, with the red wire at the top and the black wire at the bottom, like so. This orientation and connection point is very important to get correct, as the SOCD cleaner PCB will not function properly without it. Check your work thoroughly, then reinstall the PCB shroud and its 4 Phillips head screws, taking care to route all the cables through the exit path on the left side. Close the Panthera's lid once more. You can now install your push buttons. In the case of this all-button panel, you will need 11 24mm push buttons and a single 30mm push button. Seat them well so as to avoid any fussing with them backing out later. It's starting to look like an actual usable device now, isn't it? Open the lid once again. I promise I won't make you do this too many more times. We need to install the FA SOCD cleaner now. Grab the SOCD and the accompanying wire set. These wires have been pre-tinned and stripped for ease of installation. I'll show you exactly where to put them. First, take the red wire and seat it in the D terminal. Push it in and then tug on it to make sure that it's snug. Next, put the orange wire in the terminal marked U. Repeat the snug test. The yellow wire will go in the L terminal. Snug check once more. Then seat the green wire in the terminal marked R. Install the black wire in the terminal right above it marked G. Test all wires for a snug fit, then install the included adhesive PCB feet in the PCB's through holes. With the paper backings removed from the adhesive feet, install the FA SOCD fairly close to the left hinge. You will want it to be reasonably close to the hinge, as the extra ground cable will need something to fasten to. With the SOCD mounted, plug the Panthera's 5-pin harness plug to the 5-pin connector on the SOCD. Make sure to check that it is completely seated and oriented right side up. Once you've done that, take your SOCD power cable and connect the small end to the SOCD with the red cable oriented to be above the black cable. Check to verify that it is completely seated. Now we will need to fasten down the 5-pin connector plug's spare ground connector. In this case, we are going to use the bottom left Phillips screw on the left hinge. Remove the screw using your Phillips head tech driver. With the screw removed, insert the screw into the ring connector on the 5-pin harness plug's spare ground. Tighten down the screw in its original place with the ring connector attached. We can now wire up the directional buttons. From left to right, you will want to use the yellow cable for the left button, the red cable for the down button, the green cable for the right button, and the orange cable for the up button. Attach these wires individually, one per button, to their respective connections on the 4 direction buttons. Next, you will need to attach the daisy chain of ground wires to the direction buttons. The process of color does not matter here, but you'll notice that the daisy chain is designed with slack in the final connection to account for the distance to the up button. Attach all 4 daisy chain connectors to the 4 direction buttons. How you manage these cables is entirely up to you. As this is a test mule that had to be taken apart for the Noir version of this video, I simply used a Velcro cable strap to keep these cables out of my way. We're on the home stretch. Now you'll need to connect the original Panthera button wiring to your action buttons. You can use the reference card located at the top of the lid here to ensure proper connections, as it's much easier to follow than having to hear me drone about it. I've attached a reference shot here of what your final wiring should look like. Feel free to pause here if you need. And we are finished. You're off to the races. Close the lid and test your build. If you followed this video to a T, you should have 0 issues with this install. Thanks for hanging in there on one of our most ambitious videos yet. We hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and please, like, comment, and subscribe.